Hey everybody, we're talking about pemmican today. Why is pemmican so important? Why is pemmican? That's the question. I'll tell you why. Because it's amazing. It's the ultimate survival food simply because it packs a lot of calories, it doesn't need to be refrigerated, and it doesn't weigh a whole lot. Pemmican is a food item that has a heavy concentration of protein and fat with an extraordinarily long shelf life. Pemmican was a staple in the Native American culture as they used this pemmican to sustain themselves during the winter months when food was scarce. There's a lot of different ways to make pemmican, and depending on who makes it, the recipe may change slightly. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make pemmican from beginning to end. We're going to take you through all the steps, and you're going to see how easy it is to make. This style of food preparation is not common to us, and I think it's incredibly important to share food preservation techniques, as you never know when you're going to need it. Let's make pemmican. Today we're going to be breaking down the making of pemmican into three components. The first one is going to be dried fruit. I'm going to be using blueberries, bananas, cranberries, and apricots. This is totally optional as it's not necessary to make pemmican. The second ingredient is meat powder. Now this is necessary. It's the base for your pemmican, and I'm going to show you how to make meat powder. And then the third and final ingredient is going to be beef tallow. You can't use lard for this recipe. It's too soft, it has a lower melting point, and it just doesn't give you the right texture. So let's start off by making some tallow. We're going to render some beef fat, and here's what I did. Now, I can't go to the supermarket and buy already rendered beef fat in the form of tallow. So I've got to go to my butcher, ask him for some hard fat. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut that up into small pieces, and you can either place this in a food processor, or I actually ran it through my grinder with the kidney plate on, just to kind of break it up a little bit, and fed it into what's going to be the basin of a crock pot. Now, with a little bit of water added on low, and I'm just going to go ahead and cover it. This particular crock pot's going to run for a couple of hours, and it's going to begin to slowly start to render that beef fat, and what's going to be left over is going to be my tallow. But I want to strain it a couple of times just to get any food particles or any of the fat particles out of it. So I'm going to run it through a strainer. Once I get that mostly strained, I'm going to have a fairly clean liquid, and then I'm going to run that one more time through a cheesecloth. And at this point, I've now got my rendered beef fat. This is going to be the tallow for our project. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to place this in the refrigerator in a mold. So you can use whatever mold you want. I lined it with some cling film so that it can pop out pretty easy. And this is what it's going to look like just a couple of hours later. It actually hardens up very, very fast. And we're just going to pop that out of this and cut it up into little chunks so that we can get the beef tallow element of our recipe out of the way. The next thing we want to do is cut our meat. Now, using a round steak, maybe the top round, the bottom round is a good cut to use, primarily because it's very lean. You don't want a fatty cut for this particular project. I'm going to go ahead and slice it against the grain, and then once I'm finished slicing it, I'm going to cut those slices into 3/4-inch strips. If you do have a fatty cut, try to trim off as much fat as possible. What you want is 100% lean for pemmican. We're going to go ahead and put that into a bin and then begin the process of drying it. Now, you could use your oven, your dehydrator. I'm actually going to put this in my smoker because traditional pemmican was made over like a campfire, and you had a really nice smoky element going on. So we're going to use some pecan wood and some apple wood combination. We're going to be cranking up the Bella's cold smoke generator by smoking it, because this thing will smoke for easily 10 hours, and that's about how long I want to deliver just a nice steady flow of smoke to this particular beef. Now, once I get my smoker up and running, I'm going to crank it down just a little bit, and then I'm going to make sure that my settings are right. In this case, the first hour is going to cook at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The next 12 hours are going to cook at 165. And what I'm looking for is for my beef to be completely dried, crispy. I should be able to break it really easy with my hand. If it's pliable, then it needs to cook even longer. And so this is what our very, very, very dried beef looks like. You can see right here, I can just bust right into it, no problem. So now it's time to make the meat powder. Now you could use a mortar and pestle. In this case, I'm going to be using my Vitamix because I know this thing is going to pulverize that meat. And I'm going to stick all that meat in there, fill it up, and go ahead and crank on the Vitamix until it's 100% fluffy meat powder. Now that our meat powder's done, let's focus on the fruit. We need to turn the fruit into a fruit powder. So I'm going to dehydrate blueberries. I've got, apricots, bananas, cranberries. I'm going to dehydrate all of that. There's the end product, and we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with all the fruit. I'm going to first weigh my fruit so that I can add the right amount to the meat, and then I'm going to go ahead and take all of that and just place it directly into my Vitamix and let the Vitamix do the work. If you don't get it chopped up entirely into a powder with the fruit, that's completely okay. Having some small fruit pieces in your pemmican actually provides a favorable texture, so that's not that big a deal. So as you can see right here, I've got like 99% of it into a powder, but there are some small pieces, and I'm going to leave it just like that because I think it's going to be cool inside the pemmican. Now that we have our meat and fruit powders made, we're just going to go ahead and combine the two. So I'm going to take my meat powder and we're going to combine that with the fruit powder and just mix that well to combine. As soon as we have that mixed well, we're going to add another optional ingredient. I'm going to add salt. I'm going to add 1.5% salt by the weight of the fruit and the meat powder, and that's just going to enhance the flavor a little bit, make it more palatable. And we're also going to make sure that we mix this well so that everything gets very well incorporated. At this point, we need to figure out how to bind all of this together, and that's where the beef tallow comes in. So let's go ahead and weigh out our beef tallow. What I want to do is I want to put just enough beef tallow so that it holds together, but it's not too oily, and that's really the objective here. If I don't put enough, it's going to be crumbly. If I put too much, it's going to be too greasy. And so we're just going to melt that on a double boiler. Go ahead and slowly start to add that to our powders and salt, and then just mix that well once again to combine. And what's going to happen here is the fruit powder and the meat powder are going to act like a sponge, and they're just going to soak up that liquid beef tallow. And because beef tallow already is a little waxy and it hardens very well at room temperature, it's going to bind everything together. So what we're going to do is we're just going to form this into a little bitty mold. I'm going to pop it in the fridge for no longer than just a couple of hours. It doesn't take long for this thing to harden up. And then we're going to go ahead and cut it, taste it, and I'll let you know what I think. This is what our pemmican looks like now that it's done. We could store this in a vacuum seal bag outside of refrigeration. It didn't take very long. We made 5 pounds of it in roughly about 18 hours, and most of that happened overnight while it was dehydrating. Let's see what it tastes like. It smells amazing. Beefy, smoky. You get the different smells coming from the fruits, the apricot and the bananas. Not so much the blueberry. One of the biggest complaints that I hear people say when it comes to pemmican is that it's incredibly dry, that it's incredibly tasteless, it's very hard to eat. And so we're going to see if we were able to overcome those problems with this particular recipe. The secret to making good pemmican is no moisture. You're basically replacing the moisture with the tallow, and that's what gives it such a long shelf life and makes it shelf stable. So here we go, pemmican. Wow, it's definitely smoky, which adds a nice little touch, but it's not overly smoked. The salt gives it a really nice sort of enhanced flavor. I could see where if you didn't add salt, it'd be a little bland. The fruit makes a huge difference. I mean, you get a lot of sweetness coming from the blueberries and coming from, the bananas and the apricots. That tallow really binds those ingredients together, forms it into a very easy way so you can eat it. It doesn't crumble in your hand, and
and I thought that it came out amazing. It tastes incredible. Like, now granted, it is survival food, so I probably wouldn't reach for this if I was hungry and I wanted like a late night snack, but for something to have that has an enormous shelf life, what a cool food item that doesn't weigh a lot, packs a ton of calories, and actually tastes really great. It's got a great texture too. I wasn't expecting it. And I think that that's the difference between using lard, which is a lot softer, has a much lower melting point, and tallow, which is a little more waxy, very smooth, coats the mouth, goes down really, really easy, and is incredibly delicious. Pemmican. I hope you give it a shot.